Hello, church family. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
We were hoping to do this face-to-face reporting on our trip to Israel, but because of the regulations, this is going to have to do. We were already kind of losing some of our
Memory.
memory from the thing, but it was really good to go through our pictures and pick some that we could show you, as well as some stories as we go through this. We left Belize on February 22nd, traveled to Toronto, and the next day we traveled to Tel Aviv. Got there on February 24th, came back to Belize on March 6th, and we had an excellent couple of weeks in Israel. And we hope to share a little bit about that. Do you have anything to add about this trip?
It was a really good experience. It kind of felt a little bit like we were going on our second honeymoon as we got to go without the kids. Although we love our kids, it was a nice break, and we brought the average age down in our group quite a bit, so we felt quite young and
Spunky?
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you'll see some of that youngness and spunkiness in us, especially when we show you the video of us dancing. Um, we want to start off actually doing something a little bit different, and this is for the kids. We figured we would play a game with the kids, and so here it is. We saw a T-shirt while we were there, and the T-shirt was this: Med Sea, Red Sea, and Dead Sea. And we kind of smiled about it. We thought it was a pretty good shirt. And so Med Sea, of course, is the Mediterranean Sea, which is on the the west side of Israel. The Red Sea is in the south, and the Dead Sea is on the eastern border. But there's also another sea. It's actually a lake, but they call it the Sea of Galilee. And so we figured we would play a game with you. The Med Sea, Red Sea, Dead Sea, or Sea of Galilee. We're going to show you a picture, and I want you to guess which one of these the picture is taken nearby. And so the first picture that we have is this one. Was this picture taken on the Med Sea, Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Dead Sea, or the Sea of Galilee? I'll give you 3 seconds to choose what you think it is and yell it out. The correct answer is the Med Sea. The second picture is this one. Was this by the Med Sea, the Red Sea, the Dead Sea, or the Sea of Galilee? Give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. It was the Dead Sea. This is taken close to Masada. We'll talk about that a little bit later. How about this one? Which sea is this close to? If you said the Sea of Galilee, you are correct. Very lush by the Sea of Galilee. We took a boat ride. On which sea did we take this boat ride? 3, 2, 1. This was on the Red Sea, the southern part of Israel. How about this one? This would be the view from very close to the shores of one of the seas. Was it the Med, the Red, the Dead, or the Sea of Galilee? If you said the Sea of Galilee, you are correct. How about this one? Med, Red, Dead, Galilee. Which one? 3, 2, 1. That's on the Red Sea in Eilat. Have another one here. In 3, 2, 1. That's on the Sea of Galilee, looking towards the city of Tiberias. How about this one? In 3, 2, 1. That is on the Mediterranean Sea. And this one. This is actually a picture of Moses, and he's ready to squirt water on us. I didn't quite get the picture, but this was on a boat.
The boat was called Moses.
The boat was called Moses. So where would that have possibly been? On the Med, Red, Dead, or the Sea of Galilee? It is actually on the Sea of Galilee. I bet some of you said the Red Sea, right? Because Moses led the children of Israel through the Red Sea. This is on the Sea of Galilee. It's on the boat that we took. and the boat's name was Moses. And this one. You should all get this one, right? Look at Melissa having a good time. What sea is she having a good time on? My guess is most of you got this. Yes, it was the Dead Sea. And so how did you do? Did you get all of them right? If you got all of them right, I encourage you to send me a WhatsApp message saying who got it all right, and I'll at least give you a thumbs up. Yeah, figured that would be a good way to start the trip. You saw a few pictures of our trip.
Now we have a picture of kind of where we traveled each day. It's supposed to be in different colors. The first day is in red. We landed in Tel Aviv. We stayed the night there, and then the next day we went from Tel Aviv up to Caesarea, to Mount Carmel, and then to Megiddo, to Nazareth, and then all the way to Tiberias, which is on the Sea of Galilee. So our first day was a very full day, and we saw so much stuff on the first day. The second day is in the light green there. I guess there's two light greens, but the one that's close to the Sea of Galilee there.
More fluorescent green.
Fluorescent green, yes. We started off with going to Bet Shean, to Gideon Springs, and then back to the Sea of Galilee. Along the Sea of Galilee, we stopped at a few different places, Magdala, Capernaum, and we went up to the Mount of Beatitudes. The third day is in blue. We started off with taking a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee towards Mount Hermon, and then we drove towards Mount Hermon and to Tel Dan. We drove all the way up to the border of Lebanon, and then we drove along the border of Syria back down, and we saw a beautiful view of the Sea of Galilee on the east side. In the pink, we started off with leaving Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee, and we drove down towards along the Jordan to the place where Jesus was baptized, and then we drove up into Jerusalem and Bethlehem that day. The next day is the very light green. It's kind of hard to see that little squiggly thing going up. We went to Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle stood for a long time, and we also went to a place called Ariel, where they had set up a replica of the tabernacle that we went to look at. This was the one day that was a little shorter. We got back to our hotel more like at 3 or 4 instead of 6. The next day is in purple. We went from Jerusalem to Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. We stopped in at Masada, and we stopped in to swim at the Dead Sea, and then we drove down all the way to Eilat. So that was also quite a long day, a lot of driving that day. Some of us spent one day in Eilat just relaxing and sightseeing there, while some of the group went into Jordan that day. And then the last day, we drove back up towards Tel Aviv. We stopped in Beersheba and a few other places, and then we stayed the night in Tel Aviv, and we flew home the next day.
And so as you can see, it's kind of all over Israel. We definitely didn't see all the sites. I think you'd need a good year to see all the sites. But we covered a lot of ground in those 10 days. We want to kind of show some pictures at the same time. Some of the things that hit us the hardest, or that made the greatest impression on us. And we began the trip as we landed close to lunchtime. We had lunch in a garden, but then we went straight to Joppa, or Jaffa, as it's called today. And this was where we heard the first message, and we started off with a message of sending. It was a message that talked about 2 biblical characters, and Joppa being the city in which these things happened. The first character was Jonah. Joppa is where Jonah gets the message to bring to the Ninevites. It was a message of judgment, but it was ultimately a message of God's compassion on the Ninevites if they should repent. And Jonah doesn't want to go. He doesn't think that these people deserve it, and he's a little bit scared of the people that he is being sent to. And so he boards a ship in Joppa and heads the opposite direction to Tarshish. This would be the port city of Joppa, where Jonah would have been, would have gotten that message and would have gotten on the ship to go to the other side of the Mediterranean. Second character, though, that we learned about was Peter. He actually also receives a message while he's praying on a roof in Joppa. God gives him this vision that would eventually bring him, a law-abiding Jew, and Cornelius, a Caesarean Gentile, together. God would use this vision to eventually convince Peter to go and visit Cornelius. Peter would go and visit him and lead him to Christ. And really, that was the start of the spread of the gospel to Gentile territory, to Rome and beyond. This call happened in Joppa. And so Joppa was the beginning of God showing care and his plan for all the nations. Jonah ran away from that call, and Peter answered it. And we were left to consider how we respond to God's call to bring the gospel message to people of all nations. And it was a great beginning to the trip. One of the words that kept on coming up on the trip was contrasts. It was amazing. Just kilometers different. There was many different contrasts in geography. This is two pictures that show a contrast that we did see. On the left-hand side, you see the hills. This is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, in the Qumran area. And then on the right, you have a place that is about an hour and a half from Qumran. Within an hour and a half north of Qumran is Magdala, and that is right on the Sea of Galilee. And so you can see the big contrast of geography. One is very dry, one is very wet.
Here on the left, we see the Sea of Galilee again, and it's very lush. It looks very tropical, looks very much like Belize. And then not too far away is the Dead Sea. As you can see, there is not as much growing there, and there is not nearly as much life. The Dead Sea, as you can see on the picture there, you can see the lines there. Every year they say the Dead Sea is going down by a meter, right? Was it a meter? Yeah.
Next picture we have here is the views from Masada, which points towards the Dead Sea. And then you also have a view from Mount Carmel on the right. And this is a view of the Jezreel Valley. I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But very lush and green, and you can see there's lots of agriculture. And then by Masada, it was basically just plain old desert. It looked pretty barren. Another contrast that there is a contrast of cultures, and there's many different people groups. I was surprised at this, how many different people groups there were in Israel. This is a Druze village, and never heard of the Druze before. They considered Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, as one of their spiritual forefathers. They are actually, they've separated from Islam. They've created their own religion, and they like to be out in the hills far away from the rest of society and kind of do their own thing. They're mostly quiet people, but they're very loyal to the country that they live in. And so when the call came from the government of Israel that all citizens that are 18 years and older need to serve 3 years in the military, the Druze people, after considering it, they decided to join in that.
Here in the distance, you see the Bedouins. The Bedouins are nomadic people. They used to be nomadic people. They aren't as much anymore. I think they are supposed to stay more in one place. Most of them are still shepherds. They have their sheep. You would see driving by, you saw a lot of places where you would see a shepherd with his flock of sheep in the hill. Doesn't look like there's much grass for them to eat, but they say there's a lot more grass this year than there has ever been before, and I guess the sheep, they are good with running around on the hills, and so they still find stuff to eat. They're also people that do a lot of different things. They make things to sell, like clothes and different art things. Blaine has a good story for you. He tried to buy a coat from a Bedouin, and so if you ever meet him somewhere or interested in that story, you can ask him for that story one-on-one.
There's also many Arab towns, lots of villages, that are run by the Arabs. Jericho is one of the Arab-controlled cities. As many of you know, there is a two-state thing in Israel. Won't go into the politics of that, but most of these are Arab-controlled.
There is a lot of Jews that live in villages called kibbutz. It's communal living, so they all share their resources and they share their money. They do a lot of agriculture. This one that we went to visit here, you can't really see it, but they were famous for their dairy farming, and they sold a lot of milk, and they had really good ice cream. So it's very similar to what Hutterites would be like in Canada.
There's also the Palestinian-controlled cities. This is just one of those places. Bethlehem is Arab and Christian. Jews were not allowed in the city. As you can see, there's walls, and so we had to go through a checkpoint. Our tour guide, who was a Jew, was not allowed to go in. Another thing that was very interesting about Bethlehem is that the mayor of Bethlehem must be a Christian according to the Constitution, which is kind of an interesting thing. We wanted to just share a little bit of the food that we experienced there. This would have been a typical breakfast. Lots of fruit, lots of cheese. I loved it. I think my daughter Ava would love it too. And lots of bread. They had many different types of bread in all of the places that we had breakfast, especially. Here is a fish that I ate. Melissa stayed far away from it. And I ate it all. They call it a St. Peter's fish. I didn't eat it all. I ate the meat. I also ate the eyeball, which was a new experience for me. And as I was eating that, Melissa ran away because she was on the verge of losing her chicken fingers that she had. Here is the falafel. I tried most everything, and Melissa enjoys her chicken. She is the daughter of a chicken farmer after all. This is what we call falafel. This is a chickpea dish, and they deep fry it, and it's served with pita bread and some salad stuff. And so I really enjoyed the falafel. I would love to make some someday. This is available almost everywhere in Israel. And then finally, here is some lamb. Wonderful, wonderful food. And French fries. This was the first time that we had French fries in Israel. It was a few days in, so we were looking forward to a little bit more North American food. And speaking of North American food, here is me eating a McDonald's burger on our day off.
We saw a lot of different ruins all over the place. This one was in Caesarea. It's a pool that was built from the ocean. Caesarea was a town that was built in honor of Caesar, and a lot of the places here you can't see it, but in other pictures that will show you, so many of the cities are built upon a city that was destroyed before it, and then another city was built on top. So there's layers and layers of city.
Here's an ancient toilet. This is in Caesarea, and it was a communal toilet, so everybody would sit side by side. So me and Melissa tried it out, and it was very comfortable, and we could have a discussion on the can. It was wonderful. We discussed politics, and we discussed how much fun we were having, and yeah.
This is a Roman aqueduct. It was built to bring water from the hills to the city of Caesarea. It was quite magnificent, and it was many miles long, and it is cool to see how they designed it to bring water in, and how they could keep it at a level that it was just dropping ever so slightly all the way. And they did this all without the technology that we have today.
This is Tel Megiddo. This is by the Jezreel Valley. This is ruins built on top of ruins. As you can see, you can see different levels. It was very interesting to see. You could kind of see this is from 3,000 years ago, and then when someone else took over this fortress, then they tore everything down and they built on top of that. And so, like Melissa was saying earlier, this was one of the best examples of how these tells were built. So 3,000, 2,500 years, 2,100 years, 2,000 years, and it went up from there. And so there's different types of architecture within the same hill. And as they've been uncovering it, they see the different groups that have taken over this particular fortress. This one was taken over many, many, many times. This was a very, very important to the mountain pass that goes from the Jezreel Valley and into closer to the Mediterranean Sea. And so it was an important pass that many different people controlled at different times in history.
This is Bet Shean. It's another Roman ruins that we looked at. The hill behind there, that is the hill that Jonathan and Saul were taken. Their bodies were taken and hung up there. And it was to humiliate them and to show the Israelites who was in power. This city that you see here in front of you is just a very small part of it, but it was destroyed by an earthquake. And all the pillars that you see there, they have been lifted up again to kind of just show us what a Roman street looked like. And the Romans, when they took over, they loved to set up their architect the way they had it so that their culture would more influence the land that they had taken over.
This would have been the closest street that we would have seen to the streets that Jesus would have walked on, even in Jerusalem. It would have been set up very, very similar to this in the time of Jesus. This
pillar here, they left it exactly the way that they found it, just to show how the city was destroyed by an earthquake. If you look close enough, you see a lovely lady named Lori standing beside there, and just kind of shows you the massiveness of these pillars.
This is a theater in Bet Shean. Every one of these cities had these types of theaters that were kind of a part of the culture of the Roman cities, and they would display the culture of the Roman cities as well through their plays and things like that. And so it was really cool here. One of our group members sang Amazing Grace, and it just kind of reverberated around these walls. The circular dimensions of this definitely make sound come alive, how they designed it.
This is Magdala, a synagogue ruin that we went to look at. As you can see, behind there is this L-shaped building that is a hotel. It was a company in Mexico that came to build a hotel here, and as they were digging for a foundation, they came across this old synagogue. And the law in Israel is when a company, either a hotel or road, whatever company comes along, they find ruins, they have to then construct whatever they wanted to build around it, and they have to pay for the place to be excavated and made into a national site. And so that's what they have done here. When they dig for them and they uncover stuff, they can tell if the place was a rich community or a poorer community by the way the synagogue was built and designed. The richer towns would have more decorated synagogue, as this one was.
Here's another ruin site, Tel Dan. This is where I actually referred to it last Sunday in the message, where Jeroboam II built a temple where people could come and bring their offerings. And so this was a kind of a cool site for us to see. This was in the far north of Israel. But the sadness of what happened here, they set up golden calves and ended up worshiping Asherah here, and it was not a good story. And it challenged us very much to not worship out of convenience or out of our own wants, but to worship the one true God out of sincere hearts. That was kind of the message that this one brought to us. And here also the steel frame is where the altar stood. It's not like they constructed the altar out of the steel frame, but they're just showing how the dimensions of the altar and how it would have looked.
This is a view from Masada on top of the mountain. Masada was this fortress that was very popular because it was a very natural fortress. It's this mountain that is kind of just peeking out by itself, standing by itself, and so it was really hard for armies to overtake it because they would have to climb walls that pretty much went straight up, so it was impossible, or not impossible, but very hard to take over.
And you can also see, you would be able to see the armies coming from a mile away.
Yeah.
Miles away.
Yeah, there was a huge view all the way around on every side. Masada was also a winter retreat for King Herod. He built part of it for himself and for his armies, and it was taken over by different rulers over a long period of time, but the ruins are still there today. It's very high up, and so we got to take a gondola all the way up to the top, which was a really cool experience. It would have been a long journey if we had had to walk up and down, but I really enjoyed it. It was, the view up there was amazing, and the stories of this place were very interesting as well.
This is the view from Mount Carmel. Winston Churchill once said this about the Jezreel Valley, which is what you're looking at here. He said, "Never in the field of human conflict have so many fought so often over so little space." We were told of at least 34 battles that have taken place in this valley over the past 4,000 years. And so we are standing on Mount Carmel. That is where Elijah defeated the prophets of Baal. On Mount Gilboa, that's on the right-hand side of the screen, Saul and Jonathan met their end. On the hill of Moreh, near the center in the distance, Gideon defeated the Midianites and the Amalekites there. And then other things that we saw from here were Mount Tabor, which is also called the Mount of Transfiguration, where Jesus was transfigured. And you also see Nazareth in the distance on the left-hand side of the picture. From this place, you could also, on a clear day, see Mount Hermon, which is the northern part of Israel, north of the Sea of Galilee. And so we were told this is where so much happened. This is the site of so many of our stories in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Below this is Megiddo. We talked a little bit about that already. This is also where John, when he is writing Revelation, thinking about that final battle where God will be victorious, he is thinking about this valley that we are seeing right here. It's just a packed picture, and that was on the first day of touring. We already had our heads full, almost after the first day, and this picture talks about that a little bit. We spent 3 nights in Tiberias and around the Sea of Galilee, and we're just going to share a little bit about our experiences around the Sea of Galilee. We went on a boat ride, and this was a lot of fun. We sang some hymns on the boat. We also danced, and so if you didn't know Mennonites could dance, we danced like the Jews. We had a lot of fun on the Sea of Galilee.
This is a boat that they have found recently in the past 20 or 30 years. It took them about 10 years to properly dry it out with different chemicals so that it would not fall apart once it hits oxygen. And it is about 2,000 years old.
So it's very much dated at the time of Jesus. And so that's the exciting discovery that they made, and it's sitting in the museum now on the shores of Sea of Galilee. Here's one of our friends, Marv. He is testing out how to blow a shofar.
Look like a kid.
Before I just make a fool out of him, I'll also make a fool out of me. And so I also got a shofar. And so here is my shofar blowing skills. I can't do much better, and so that's about as good as I can do it. Onward. Here's a picture of me fist bumping Peter, and here is a picture of me and my friend Marv and a Franciscan monk. And with this guy, we communicated through Google Translate and had a good conversation with this guy who keeps the site of Capernaum up and running.
This is the view from the Mount of Beatitudes overlooking the Sea of Galilee.
This is where Jesus would have, where they think Jesus, or a place like this, is where Jesus would have given the Sermon on the Mount.
This is a view of the Sea of Galilee from the other side, and the trees that you see with the pink blossoms there, those are olive trees.
No, they aren't.
What are they?
They're almond trees.
Sorry, almond trees.
You'll see a better picture of that in a little bit. This is also from a very similar place to that last picture. This is the Golan Heights. This is where Jesus will have commanded the demons to go into the pigs. This would have been the terrain of where the pigs went into the Sea of Galilee. Very similar to that. That is from the east side of the Sea of Galilee. This is where Melissa's going to take over.
No. These are some pictures of flowers and plants that we saw in Israel. There was a lot of flowers, a lot of planted flowers, but also a lot of flowers that were just growing naturally all over the hillside and on the countryside. This is a picture of the national flower of Israel. And everywhere that you looked, there was just so many wildflowers growing everywhere. It was very beautiful. And it was law also in Israel that you are not allowed to pick wildflowers. They need to stay where they are so that everyone can enjoy them.
But there was one time where the tour guide wanted me to be romantic, and so
he let Blaine pick some flowers for me.
Aren't they beautiful?
Yes. Here are some more pictures of, this is the same picture.
Yeah, this is, I told them that they would see another picture of the almond trees, yeah.
Okay, so these are almond trees.
Yes, almond.
And more flowers.
And there's a beautiful flower, actually the most beautiful one that was in Israel at that time. They've exported that one to Belize now.
And more beautiful flowers.
This is Bethlehem. There's just several sites that we wanted to share with you. One of them was Bethlehem. This is the Church of the Nativity. And
there's 3 different churches built on this site. But the entrance that most people went through is this one. It's called the Eye of the Needle. You have to sort of bend down to get in, and it just was a way of showing humility as you came into this place.
this is the place that they say they believe Jesus was born, and so they made a little shrine over it. And you see that a lot in Israel. The Roman Catholic Church will put these shrines over the places that they believe things had happened, that Jesus was there. And so this is one of those. There's also North American food and drink chains. Here you see there's Stars and Bucks Cafe, and so I think that I don't think that's authentic.
This was a chapel that we went to visit. It was very famous for the sound that it had when people would sing in it. So we went in as a group, and there was another group already in there, and the sign said that each group just was supposed to get 5 minutes. And so we waited patiently, I think, for a lot more than 5 minutes for the other group to finish. And they left, and then we sang our songs, and since there was no one waiting behind us, we sang a few extra songs. And during that time, there was another group that was outside waiting, and when we came out, there was this girl that was just crying because she thought our singing sounded so beautiful, and they asked if we would go back in and sing some more. So we went back inside and we sang some more.
But this is just a taste of what singing in this place sounded like. So it was beautiful, the sounds. Maybe not this picture is not quite as beautiful, but this is me and a sheep just hanging out, having a good time. The sheep really liked me very, very much. And I really, really liked the sheep. Jerusalem was also one of the places we spent several days in and near. So this is a picture of Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. The gold dome in the center is actually a Muslim mosque, and it used to be the place where the temple once stood. And so you see the old city walls of Jerusalem. If you go to the left-hand side, on the far left-hand side is the city of David outside those walls. The city of Jerusalem has also been torn down and then reconstructed quite a few times, and so the current city is built actually about 3 meters above the streets where Jesus would have walked. And so it doesn't look like it was when in Jesus's time, but at least most of it doesn't.
This is the view from the Mount of Olives looking toward Jerusalem, and down in the valley is where the Garden of Gethsemane is.
And this is the Garden of Gethsemane. Here is an olive tree. This is about a 1,500-year-old olive tree. There was a 2,000-year-old one, but it was behind a fence. Didn't get quite as nice a picture of it. But there was one that likely when Jesus was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. This would be a standard street in the current city of Jerusalem in the Muslim quarter. We walked through this area the first day. And there would be shops on either side, and yeah, believe it or not, cars actually were driving on these streets as well. So we were dodging cars, cars were dodging us. It was a very interesting situation.
This picture was taken in Hezekiah's tunnel. It was a tunnel that was built to bring water into the city.
So this is in the city of David, which is outside of the walls of the old city of Jerusalem right now.
This is the Pool of Siloam, or what they believe to be the Pool of Siloam, and where Jesus would have sent the blind man to wash his eyes.
This is the western wall of the Temple Mount, also called the Wailing Wall, and there was quite a few people. This is where the Jews would come and they would say their prayers. In the walls, you would also see papers. That's kind of a custom at the Wailing Wall, is to put your prayers on a paper and then put it into the wall. But you would see a lot of Jewish rabbis, and they would be saying their prayers, and it was a very interesting experience. At the beginning, I talked a little bit about contrasts, and I want to end this whole report speaking about the contrasts that we saw, more culturally and more specifically between the Catholic and the Protestant sites in Israel. This particular picture is taken inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is a Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox, and Armenian church. They share this site. This is where they would have set up shrines that would have said, this is where Jesus was crucified, where his body was prepared, and then where he was buried. I'll show pictures in a little bit. This particular thing was where they believe Jesus was crucified. This is where they believe Jesus' body was laid to prepare it for burial. And you noticed where people were taking out cloths and rubbing it on this place, and incense, and bringing it there and rubbing it on this stone. And it felt for us a little strange. It felt a little bit like the place was being worshipped. This was the shrine that is set up over what they believe to be the tomb of Jesus, where Jesus was laid to rest. His body was laid to rest, and it just was just huge, and it was busy. This whole church was a very busy place. Right after we went here, we went to the Garden Tomb, and this is a Protestant site. This is run by Protestants, and the quietness after seeing the wildness of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, that contrast was a wild one for us. This is where they say it could be Golgotha, the place of the skull where Jesus was crucified. They say it could be. They didn't say with certainty that this was the place, but this was, you can kind of see in the center of the picture, you kind of see two eye sockets. Because of erosion, it looks a little bit different than it did even 50 years ago. Here's a picture that they took a few more years ago of the same hill where the Protestants believe it could have happened, where Jesus was crucified. And you can see there it has a little bit more of a picture of the skull. This was also on a road. They always crucified people on the side roads so that more people would see, and that it would be a thing of a little bit more humiliation. And so they believe this was on a main road, and that's why they say it could be here that Jesus was crucified. This is the Garden Tomb. This could have been a place where Jesus was buried, at least in a place like this. It is likely that Jesus was buried. One of the things that our tour guide there said is, we don't worship a place, we remember an event. So it doesn't really matter if this was where Jesus was buried, or that hill was where Jesus was crucified. The place doesn't really matter, because we serve a God that did this for us, that there was an event attached to it. We remember an event. And that was meaningful for me. It was quiet, and it was about the event that happened, not about the place. We have Easter Sunday coming up, and this is what we're remembering. We're remembering that Jesus died, that he was buried, and that he rose again. We serve a living God, and the truth of this place is that he rose. He's seated on the throne as King of us. It is him and him only that we worship. It was a challenge for me to not focus so much on the earthly things, maybe the preferences in worship, the things that we can see, but rather to allow those things to lead me to the reality of his death and his resurrection. What are the realities because of that event? The rest is just there to lead me to a greater dependence and relationship with him. And really, this trip was not to touch places where Jesus touched. I didn't buy holy water from the Jordan River, or get a flask of sand that maybe Jesus' feet touched. That wasn't the purpose of this trip. I didn't really feel any closer to Jesus by just being there. But it sure helped me to remember the events that happened 2,000 years ago, and actually other events that the Bible describes. But especially that event that happened 2,000 years ago, where I was forgiven and my life was bought at a high price. And in that way, I think the trip led me into a greater understanding, and I think it did lead me into a closer relationship with him. One of the verses that I thought I could share kind of at the end of this report is from Psalm 139. And I think this is what this has taught me. Psalm 139, starting at verse 1. It says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways," whether that be in Israel or in Belize. "Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. This is what got me. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your hand will hold me fast." Whether I go to Israel or whether I am in Belize, God knows my coming and going, and his spirit is there with me. And that is an important part of what I learned. And then finally at the end, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting." And that's my prayer for all of us as we go through this time. It is something that I think going to Israel should help us to be led to giving ourselves more fully to the Lord. Not necessarily to feel closer to him just because we're in the land that he walked, but to feel closer to him by giving our life more fully to him. Yeah, we couldn't possibly get all of the pictures on this. We still won't be able to show you all the pictures, but we do want to just simply put just a few pictures together at the end, things that were important to us in a short 5-minute slideshow. Enjoy this slideshow.
We want to thank those that made it possible for us to go.
Yeah, there were some very generous people, and so thank you so much.
Thank you also to the church for allowing us to go and to have this experience. It was very much appreciated.
And very much of a blessing, so thank you. We enjoyed it. Enjoy the pictures, and thanks for listening. I hope we didn't bore you too bad. Often on these things you experience all these things, but to transfer those experiences is a little bit difficult. I know that my preaching will be different as we go forward, and I think that's where some of the differences of this trip will eventually kind of come out. And so I'm looking forward to preaching knowing the context very much. So God bless you. Thanks for listening.
Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. Early in the morning, our song shall rise to thee. Holy, 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 merciful
always give strength to your people. For if we could be with you one day in time, it is better than 1,000 without you. God our protector, keep us in mind, and always give strength to your people. For if we could be with you one day in time, it is better than 1,000 without you. It is better than 1,000